Oh, by the way, I just clicked on the recording. So I know, Matt, you'll be listening to this. I apologize for first few minutes here not being recorded. So I'm just joining in. Don't think you missed much from the standpoint, just an introduction of where we're headed. And so basically, we're going to have a charter that we'll be drafting up in this course. And I'm going to take a look at it, be sure that it conforms to the NGS requirements, because it's really a contract, up to between you as a team with your champion and NGS. And so we'll have you develop that charter, and we'll look to have your champion sign it, and each of your team members, and I will sign it. And I'll cover the procedures and how that goes. It also goes into the tracker as a part of your repository of documents that are necessary for your project. And if you got any difficulties in projects, the other part of these master business processes, these courses that we have, like the one now and the one you'll have in November, is really to see if there's any issues also that you may be encountering as a team with your projects, whether it's something with the champion or something that may be within the team dynamics, or is there anything that we don't think that you're on track? Because the other purpose of this is kind of the lead faculty is ensuring, as my part of the school's quality control, that you're proceeding in your projects at about the right schedule. In other words, you're accomplishing where we think you ought to be in the life cycle of your project at this point. And so I'll give you my feedback to you where I think you're on track, whether you need to kind of accelerate some part of this, or whether some of you may even be ahead of schedule. And quite frankly, plan for Murphy. Plan for Murphy. If you can get your projects finished sooner, and we have our last class, which is the very final Master Business Process 3. If you can do the briefings and get your approvals in from the champions early on, that's a great goal to have, because then you don't have to worry about getting the last set of recommendations in the last week. So if you can, we'll talk about the schedule of your project and doing your charters. That's one of the things, laying out some major milestones. Be sure that you have a clear picture of the road ahead. So not only are we going to talk about where you are up to this point, is part of the outcome that we have for this course is be sure that you have a very good picture of the future requirements of the classes you have, how that fit in. So the mosaic of your academic picture that you're putting together here with your projects and the other classes you have kind of all comes together. So you have a good progress report up to this point. I'll give you my feedback on where I think you are, and then I'll try to, as we go through these courses, give you some idea what may be lying ahead with the NGS set of requirements, and then we'll talk about where you are concerning your champions. So, and then we'll look at individual as well as team progress. And again, we're just going to be building on your previous classes that you've had, integrating all those things, the project management theories, and you should be also, if you look at the workload that we have, it's not a lot of heavy lifting in this particular one, in regards to assignments and discussion questions, and purposely so. We really want the teams, for you, spend some time ensuring that you are collecting data and that you're actually working the project side of this in a way that is in sufficient detail and with sufficient data, and so that you have time to devote working with the champion organization, with each other in developing these charts and collecting the data and scratching your heads and looking at the data, start looking at some analysis, preliminary recommendations. So the real focus is behind the scenes here, is that you sharing data with each other. We'll talk about a plan that you should have around data collection, which will give you a blueprint for your approach, and that'll be one of your deliverables. Actually, we'll have a plan that we'll talk to tonight, and then we'll ask you to put it together for review next week, and we have a template for you. So that's going to be part of this. But this is really a chance for us to kind of have a dialogue as well about your projects. And one of the things that typically happens at this stage is, one, I would like to get an update from you. And I'm going to ask you in a moment, just kind of go around the horn, where you think you are in your projects. Just one member of each team, just kind of say where are you kind of satisfied with the progress, any major things like that. You don't have to go into detail, but I do want to know from each one of you and each one of the teams if there's any showstoppers that you think that there may be occurring, whether it's in something that's going on with the team or we're not able to get some data, the champion maybe is changing the scope of our project. There's other things we hadn't thought about that may be coming in. Sometimes I come back into the course and we find out, oh, look, I got a job offer, and I'm going to a different job here in the next couple of months. I'm going to have to be leaving the team. So we've had circumstances like that. So if there's anything of consequence to your project that you think you may be in peril, I want to know as soon as possible. You can shoot me an email, give me an idea, as we go around here on a quick update. And if there's things that I need to prioritize my time, because when we do the mentoring sessions, I'll queue up you guys that may be having some challenges first. So we can get those resolved, because I'm really vested in ensuring that you're on a successful path, and that if there's any issues that do come up, that we resolve them in the very first part of this course, if possible. So let me just ask you guys, if we would just have one member just kind of maybe just talk a little bit about the project. Where do you think you are in its, has any major changes to the problem statement occurred? And how's the champion interface been so far? So let me just kind of go and ask each member from the team kind of give a quick 60 seconds update about your project. So Cameron or Edgar, would you like to start, please?
Yeah, I could take this one.
Okay.
I'll go for it, Cap.
Oh, well, no, I was gonna say, our champion, we've kept in talks with him. The only problems I foresee is we've had a lot of workload issues, been very inconsistent, and a couple possible process changes, but I don't. That's for production, but I don't see it really affecting us a whole lot. So, what's your take, Edgar?
One of the issues that we're kind of facing is, like Cameron mentioned, the workload is that our day-to-day champions have been kind of sporadic in terms of some of them taking vacation or being sent to out of the state or being put into separate projects. And our main sponsor, he's been traveling more for business, and so it's been kind of hard or more so difficult for us to kind of really have a face-to-face to really present our problem and to see what their take is on it.
Okay. All right. Sounds like you guys are pretty busy, and this is always a challenging time because a lot of folks do take off. At least I know where I am in my work. It's like Sleepy Hollow in August because everybody's taking off leave and it's very difficult to do things. We're doing actually some strategic planning where all the key members of the organization are supposed to be. There's like 12 of them, and kind of like disciples, round table. But they basically, we've had people, hey, I'm taking off leave and this thing, and strategic planning, you just cannot, make commitments about the future of an organization and somebody doesn't agree with that. So it's been challenging. But you bring up a very good thing. I would like for you, when each team has, I'm going to ask about the quality of the interaction with your champions, because that is really important. Because one of the last things you want to do is continue progressing through your project, and they got a little different idea about what you should be focused on, or you've lost contact with them, and they don't have a clear picture of where you're headed. So we'll talk a little bit about maybe some techniques if there is particular issues that you need guidance on, or particularly around scope. Is there any changes to your problem statement since we last got together? That may be a hard question because you may not remember what it looked like when we last got together in our last course. But has there been any modifications to the problem statements of recent?
Not entirely, but with Mr. Ferguson's in the last class that we had, one of the things was pointed out to us that Cameron and I are looking at add to our statement, which is adding a little bit more factual data of where our current standing is for our project. Well, not for a project. Ours is trying to improve the first pass yield of a certain cell within our campus, and we're looking to add what the current first pass yield is, or give more definition as to how many months we haven't met it, or what's happened with it since we started.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Right, we'll talk about a lot more detail when we get together. I'm interested in. We'll actually be covering some things tonight. You kind of hit a little bit, give a direction towards by talking about this is operational definitions, and so sometimes we'll talk about this, like if you have an issue around first pass yield in the terms of what we use in measurement called operational definitions. But okay, so it sounds like you guys are tracking. There's some things that you know of concern, but nothing big. Blocks in the way. Doesn't sound like. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, anything else?
I think that's it, Professor.
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the quick update. Oh, okay. Eaton.
Yeah, so this is Dave.
Hey, Dave.
Hey. So our group's doing good. Haven't really had any issues. Champions, not a problem. We have pretty much access to whatever we need, so getting data, anything like that's not a problem. We do have a little bit of an update because there's some engineering changes that are going to go on with the product. So this analysis, this is all still has to be done, what we're doing. So it just might make our timeline a little tighter to get the analysis done and stuff. So we'll just be keeping an eye on that to make sure we get our stuff done in a timely manner so that engineering can do their change to the product line like they're planning.
Okay. All right. Is it being accelerated, you considering?
Not too bad. They're still talking to switch over first quarter next year. So
okay.
We still have some time, but I just want to make sure that our timeline's met so that we don't interfere with the engineering change that's going to go on. So hopefully we can be done and wrap things up before they actually have to start into that changeover.
All right, you guys bring up a very important point because we're going to look at schedule, like large milestones for your project. And most of the time, students will design a schedule based on between now and graduation, right? That makes great good sense because that's the school's requirement. But the other part, and what we've done before in some teams, if there's an organizational requirement, sometimes we've had champions that, well, they're under the gun to meet a goal or objective, and they want need it done a little bit sooner than what our graduation schedule is. Or there may be, like you say, maybe an engineering or perhaps a new technology being filled, or perhaps there is, we actually had one company being sold and they want the project to be completed before it would be sold to the new owners and transitioned. So, all sorts of things. And so when you think about the schedule and how we lay this out, one of the questions that we want to know, is there any operational things from your champion about that? Or they want an interim report. Sometimes we've had teams that, need to provide an interim report because there's a quarterly readiness review or there's a a conference where people have to report out on their project status, and we need to meet that. So don't fall into just doing what the academic requirements are. Be sure you know and understand and ask your champion about any other, things that they may be seeing, or, and they have a clear picture what your schedule is. And that will be part of the discussion when you do the charter, just laying out the milestones. Is it acceptable? This is need to happen. We've actually kind of had some teams finish up a little bit early because of meeting the champion's requirements, because that's, the other deliverable we have. And so we've got some flexibility depending on this, but sometimes we need to work it with the other professors to let them know what's happening. So doesn't sound like maybe it's that dramatic in your case, but I thought I'd give you guys, the entire cohort, that perspective. So, okay. Anything else from Dave or other members of the team?
I'm not sure if you heard that we did lose a member of our team. Now we're down to 3, just me, Sam, and Dave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, academic affairs, let me know. And so we'll be monitoring that. Thanks.
But other than that, everything's going well, and Dave's been very forthcoming with information and everything. And come to find out that I'm actually close to him here in Boston and could be able to make a commute there if I have to. I haven't done it yet, but it's in the plan.
Yeah. A long time ago, before we did this online, we always had teams do projects that were, they met in classrooms. We had most of our courses done face-to-face. And so the projects were usually drawn from geographical locations where the students were, from the work environment. So when they met, the whole team walked the hall, right? Met the champion. We used to do, when I do charter signing, I would go actually here in the DC metro area, or sometimes it was down in Virginia and other places, and sign and meet the champion. And the team really had that face-to-face capability. It just adds to the richness of your experience when you're actually able to see the things and they get to see you. And so here, it's challenging online, but if you can do this online, you certainly can do it in the face-to-face mode. So if you have any opportunities, we've had several students kind of do that. In fact, like last year, I had 2 students that, one student planned a vacation. They went up, stayed in a hotel, but also made it a trip where they saw the other person, and they actually, had a real team building type of thing. So if you have an opportunity to visit in Current, I would encourage that, and it's good to hear. All right. Well, good. Sounds like nothing, no big obstacles. Sounds like you guys are overall. And by the way, if anybody has a different opinion or like things, you will let me know. Again, feel free to contact me on that. So, great. And if there's no other additions, then okay. How about Team Aircraft, Brian? Jay, you would give a quick summary?
Hey, how you doing, Professor?
Good. So how's the project going?
It's going. As far as the champion, right? Currently, we're real busy. Either he's out or I'm out. And last month, the champion, he was involved in a motorcycle accident, so he was out for a while. They just came back, but because of these hurricanes and evacs, we're busy. Only obstacle or hurdle that I can see right now is some of the people that we be dealing with and need to try to collect data or contractors. They're outside civilians, and they don't like to give a lot of information, but I think I found a way around that.
Hey, that's a great point. This almost comes up in every NGS project team we have. And it also comes up in the real world because contractors, and if they're part and parcel to the project, in other words, they're contributing to it, but there's a lot of legal and issues that to me or may not be involved with that. not only in obtaining data, but sometimes interviewing them or perhaps engaging them in problem solving or how you deal with that. So that's one of the areas I really want to talk to each one of the teams. Some of you are completely self-contained. The organization doesn't have any contractors involved, suppliers that are external to the organization. But for those that are, this is always an issue, how you deal with this. And sometimes if they perceive a contract being basically maybe up for rebid and contributing to a team and providing information to them, whether that curves favor, there's all these other messy things that kind of get in the ethical realm that I want to talk to. You're going to cover in benchmarking some of the ethics involved with getting data from external resources. But we've had people go in and say, hey, we've got a contractor that's got a great solution, and they're willing to sell us this technology. And then you guys are making a recommendation, and all of a sudden another competitor finds out about that, you know, and it may just complicate, and particularly in the federal sector, competition. That is, so we'll talk about that. If there's anything that has to deal with implications, difficulty of getting to data, and we're going to talk about later on how you actually, what the data looks like, where is it at, and how are you going to share it amongst yourselves. So those are great issues. So I'm glad to bring that up. So has the rest of the team, have you taught them a little, you know, are you guys talking Air Force now? You know, you're saying Roger this, or, you know.
We go back and forth. I have to have a lot of things translated as well as they do. You know, we're trying to get that happy medium.
Okay. All right. So if you guys need a designated translator again, let me know. I'll see how we can, you know, translate the Air Force lingo back into business English. Okay. All right. Let's see. Anybody else, Nicolo or Megan or Matthew? I see Matthew's on. Okay, good. Okay. Hey, Judith, welcome. So Judith is logged on. So.
I'm here, sir.
Now you're not
using
escaping
the phone, so I have to flip it.
How are you?
Say again, sir?
Are you okay in Key West? Are you evacuating or anything?
Oh, yes, we are. We are on mandatory orders to evacuate. We have several locations. We are on orders to evacuate to those locations. So we're still boarding up the house, packing, and early tomorrow morning, you know, it's we're planning on be hitting the road, heading to Orlando.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, I saw the long lines. Be safe and
Yes.
Keep me advised. The impact probably will be next week on you, whatever occurs. So your safety and well, I hope it turns out really well for you.
Roger that, sir.
Okay. Hey. All right. Let's see. I think we've covered the teams. Anybody else have any other comments that we want to quickly add on that? Okay. If not, let's march on then. And here's a couple of things. We're going to have, there's a slide deck that actually kind of outlines what the deliverables of this course will be. And again, what we are doing now is that you are developing basically, instead of a thesis, instead of a master's thesis where you're writing all this information down like many other folks and other schools are doing, is that your thesis is going to be basically a slide deck and an oral brief, okay? So, and it is the story of your project. It is the one that begins, you know, from, and has a logical flow that follows the storyline of the DMAIC, the define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And one of the things that we're going to be doing then is ensuring that you have some minimum requirements with that, and that you're comfortable in not only showing your data, but be able to explain it and see the interrelationships of each one of these things you've been doing. Now, you've been off doing a lot of different courses. You've got some project management stuff. You've got some performance-based management things. You had, strategic planning, and you're about to get others that you're going to include in this. So we're going to have some placeholders for the upcoming courses we go through. But we're going to have, then, if you take a look in the course materials, there's a format for what you're going to have to deliver. So we'll cover these with you tonight and talk about the things you can have. Particularly important will be a data collection plan. And then in behind that is going to be all this data that you're going to collect. Then you go through the analysis, and you'll have your analysis charts and recommendations. And so that will be into your recommendations for improvement, and et cetera. So our purpose is not only for you to go and review and incorporate what you've learned in the other courses, is also to figure out how do you see the connections between these things? Like, how does your problem statement impact what you're about to do in your data collection? And so you're going to have to be able to explain that and see the relationships and make the connections for yourselves in this. So the other thing we're looking for, and not just a slide deck, but really the understanding that goes across all of these different slides. That's what one of the purposes of this course is to, as you kind of go deep in each one of these topics that you have the courses in, we'll bring you back up. Okay, well, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at where you are in the project, and that you can tell this story. We're going to continue to build on this story. You're going to add, as you have your other courses, additional slides to that. Your challenge will be, as you move through the project, if you start to look at it, you're gaining a lot of information. You are now having to make decisions about what you have to say is essential to your telling your story, to telling your champion your story, to telling the school how you're using the tools and how your progress is doing. And so you're going to have more charts and slides generated out of your class than you have time to brief, because we're going to constrain you to ensure that when you do your briefing, it's going to be about 30 minutes. And so you're going to tell the life story of this year in about 30 minutes. That causes you to then select what's the really most important things. What are the things I want to highlight? What are the things I want to really emphasize and then as we move forward. So that's one of the purposes of the deliverables we have. We'll add these slides in, the data collection. You'll be doing some fishbones, which are requirements, Pareto's, root cause analysis. These are things which are minimally required by the school, that you understand how to use these tools, and that you have slides and diagrams that are suitable in here. So take a look at that. There'll be a format. You'll need to be able to also brief which slide or which chart or which tool you're briefing in its relationship to the DMAIC model, to define, measure, analyze, improve. So we want you to correlate where you are in this process, the tools that you're learning, where you are, and which ones are then associated with each one of these steps. And there'll be some of these that kind of overlay in more than one area. That's part of the things we're looking for, is that you can talk to. Here's the references we have. Hold on, I got a slide pausing for some reason. Okay. Nothing new for you to buy. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. All right. Should use the Nancy Tague book, which you already have. We'll be using some of the reference material from the GIMBA online as well in materials. And here's kind of a listing of the assignment schedule. Is that we're going to cover tonight data collection, plans, and operational definitions. And so that'll be your first task, really, as a major deliverable. The other thing is going to be a evaluation, basically how well your team is functioning, and your self-evaluation of how well each members of your team are contributing. What I'm going to ask you to do is fill this out separately, turn that in to me, and before we get together for our first mentoring sessions, because next week, as I mentioned, we'll be here 8:00 p.m. Eastern, next Wednesday, providing we're not getting blown around by a hurricane, and then after that we do our first mentoring session. So the first mentoring session A, and then normally there'll be a second mentoring session at least. Sometimes we even do more if the team so desires. So there's going to be 2 mentoring sessions that we have for this course. And sometimes it's your own team call. If you'd like to meet with and continue the dialogue about something, we'd glad to do that. So, but we'll have at least 2 of those. And so the assignments are then kind of tagged to when you have that session. So when you have the first session, we want to be able to talk to your evaluation, but also talk to your presentation and collection plan. And before we have our second one, for instance, there'll be some charts that you have to do. So that's how this chart is arrayed, to show you when things are due. So there's some flexibility. Some teams may be meeting, hey, we're ready to go. We've got everything. We've got pretty good data. We've already been busy at doing that. We're ready to brief you on this. And so we might queue you up, on Monday of the following week, for instance. Somebody else may need to the following Friday, or maybe the following week even. Don't let it slip too much. And so there's flexibility when these assignments are done. And as you know, in the portal, it doesn't have that quite a, we can break it down by team. So go by this as a guideline for when things are due and what we'll be doing. So you need to look at this, and then also look at that template we have for presentation about what slides are needed. Okay, you're going to do a draft charter. I'm going to look at it. When we go over that, I want to talk to you before we leave in our second mentoring session. Because as you may, like Cameron and Edgar say, if your champion is on travel or going around or really committed, what I'd like you also do is to talk, once we get the charter about right, is when the team's going to sign it and when the champion's going to sign it. And sometimes you need to nail down the availability of your champion for that. And so in addition to the draft charter, I would like to have a proposed date when you're going to have it signed as a team, and also with by the champion. So that discussion we'll have in our second mentoring session. Okay. And then there's just another discussion. We have a discussion question kind of about what do you think maybe challenges around your data collection, and there's another discussion question around 5 whys, root cause analysis, for you to do a practical application of that. So basically, that's the deliverables. Most of the time should be spent collecting data, doing charts, and attending these mentoring sessions. Any questions about the assignments or the schedule that we have here? Okay. Again, here's where we are. We're kind of right there in talking about progress and monitoring where you should be against the schedule. You should be, at this point in your course, is collecting the data, getting that about pretty well done, defining the as-is state. We'll be transitioning into the analyze phase. So by the end of November, you should have pretty good set of data collected, and you should have some emerging recommendations that are coming out of your analysis. So you should be kind of between that analysis and the improve. And so around November or so, you should be getting things, if you haven't already, a set of recommendations that you may want to try out. All right. The improve phase is those set of recommendations that you want to maybe start to look at that may be going to improve your process and improve your project. And also what will happen then is that some of these you want to run a pilot on. In other words, let's try them out in small scale. It may be on maybe one shift, or maybe it's on one portion of the organization, maybe on one airframe or something like that. But it's usually a smaller scale as part of the Plan, Do, Check, Act. But basically it is you pilot it, see if it works, observe it, collect some data from the pilot, see if it's actually going to work, and then you learn from that and maybe refine your recommendations for your final recommendations that you provide in Master Business Process 3. And so there's a component here that there may be some things you want to recommend, and you want to try them out, then evaluate them, and then refine them before you give a set of final recommendations. So that time frame is usually around December, January, for most teams, if they're going to do pilots. And sometimes you have to collect data over, a couple of cycles or a couple of iterations. And so there's you may want to run that type of thing. Or you do benchmarking, and you get this next class. A lot of times if you want to go out and get some external information, we've had teams actually go out and visit other organizations. You didn't get that information in those set of recommendations from that external benchmarking until the November, December timeframe. So those are part of your improved recommendations. You'll be getting things from the other classes you've got coming up as well. So then the control, which we'll talk about later, is really the last class you have. What are the things you can recommend for them to monitor? What are the charts and things, and performance metrics that you're going to recommend to the champion that they look at to ensure that the project is delivering the results that you think it should, based on your recommended improvements. And so that's kind of the flow, the way ahead here. So you've got some things that you already should be developing through your process analysis coming up. You will be adding things in from your other courses, particularly from the benchmarking and also from your lean course, which is the business analysis, process analysis course, which is in December and January. That will be part of your recommendations for improvement will be coming out of that as well. So that's kind of the big picture. As we said, we're following this. Once you be able to talk about that, where you are, this is kind of where we are with the classes. If you look at the project management phases, about where we are, one of the things we're going to be developing is your collection of data, your data planning, data collection plan. We'll be talking about that. Then you should be executing that. And some of you already maybe running into some difficulties with that, or we already got some data in there, and probably a combination of those things, of difficulties and things that data that you thought about but haven't gotten to yet. And so we'll have some time here, basically over the next couple of months, for you to really kind of focus on data collection. That's where you should be at this point. And that's the closure part is also going to be a part of our discussion, Master Business Process 3. How do you turn the project back over to the client, back over to the champion? Well, as I said, everything you learn, we're looking for integration. So when we just talk about data collection, we're going to go back and say, how does that relate to your problem statement? How does it relate to the CRM? How does that relate to the other things you've developed? So again, looking for you to integrate concepts as we go through. Okay. Now, let's talk about this, the measure phase. That's where we are. It is the as is, not the ought to be, not the future state. When you get your recommendations for improvement back on the I here, right, of the DMAIC, right, this is to be the future state. You'll be say, okay, here's what we think, how the changes to this project will look like. Here's the recommendations we see our process recommending changes in steps of our procedures, or maybe introduction of new technology or new ways to reduce number of defects, improve time. But so your future state's going to be an improved phase. But here's the measure. All we want you to do is just capture what's going on currently, current performance. Okay, and you will use these often in your improved phase, because you'll say, okay, here's what it would look like. Now, this is how we improved it. So a lot of times the flow charts, the data you collect here establishes the baseline of the current performance. And then your recommendations, you'll start, okay, this is how we improved it. This is how many steps was in that process. This is how we improved it. Knocked down from 14 steps to 10 steps, and knocked X amount of hours or days off the process, or reduced the number of defects. So you'll use a lot of times what you develop here in the measure phase, again, in your improve phase, because you show, okay, this is what at least it look like. This is how we improve it. And so important thing, though, is that you got to measure something, and you got to be able to collect some data around that. And a large, the other thing is, it's usually about taking what's invisible, right? Things that, may not be seen by a lot of different people. A lot of times in measurement phase, it's making the data that's invisible. I know, for instance, what do I mean by that? For instance, we have, where I work, there's a work order system called Maximo. There's a lot of information in Maximo. People put it in, but it's invisible unless you start to collect data and analyze that. and make reports and make some decisions out of it. And so there's a lot of people just putting data in, and they have no idea how to farm that information for insights. So it's invisible. And a lot of things, what you're going to do is through your charts and your graphs, you're going to provide insights about this data. You're going to be able to portray it in a way that may be more meaningful than this way it's portrayed currently in the databases or the Excel worksheets or on the whatever data, how it exists. And so one of the things that as we look at information is that is making what's invisible visible, so that you can start to say, how big is our problem? What's the number of defects? What's the level of satisfaction, dissatisfaction? So it's helping people to see it in the same way. And a lot of times, as I mentioned, later on, you will use these charts again, not only in your improvement recommendations, but in your control phase. And so when you go back and say, okay, here's all the things we're going to do to recommend that you improve this process, right? These are the things, the charts we recommend that you continue to monitor and use to ensure that it is hitting the targets that we have, it's hitting that first time yield through. This is things we see that we developed in our measure phase, and a lot of times you will use these same charts and you recommend back to the champion, hey, continue to use these so you can get a twofer out of this. In other words, you get to use it now in helping describe the as is, but a lot of times these same charts are the ones they'll use in the control phase to monitor way after you turn the project back over to the champion and you guys are graduating, and they're continuing to use these charts and diagrams to monitor the process. So in saying that, some of you may be, in your organization, well, most organizations have Microsoft-based products, Office. I've seen a lot of teams come in, NGS teams even. We have black belts in here. Many of you may use Minitab or some advanced statistical analysis capabilities. And one of the things that's important to understand is wherever you're working, you should think about what you're going to do when you hand this over. And if they can't replicate your charts, they can't update them, they can't get the data that they have currently and put them in here because they don't know it or don't have that software, it may not be the best approach. So as we talk about what you're going to develop and what is the software, are you going to do it in Excel, are you going to do it in PowerPoint? One of the things that should be kind of as a guideline, what does your champion have in this organization? What's their capability to use this? If you're working in a federal environment, fat chance you're going to get any additional, super fancy software, statistical packets, Minitab or other type of things brought into the system, because it just takes years, right? If you work in the government, you know what I'm talking about. So ensure that you are also thinking about your champion, that once this project is over with, you're going to give them these charts as your part of your gift or as your set of recommendations to them. And they need to be able to use them, and often you'll be able to use them and build upon them. The process you charts, often I've seen them get developed into policy or procedures or SOPs, and then those get updated. And so you should give them a file and say, okay, here's how you can use what we're giving to you, not just for this one project, but for a long time. And so here's some comments. Again, tonight, I'm just going to kind of give you my stream of consciousness. We'll have a little bit more time for dialogue as we go through this, but let me cover some of the high-level things. And if you have any questions, let me know. Here's some tips. Data collection. A lot of times, people just start jumping in, right? We need to collect data. I got stuff, right? Well, that's a technique. What we want to suggest is that you have a little bit of a disciplined approach. And I want you to think about what's the data that you need to collect. And for your that are in the manufacturing venues, you typically have a lot of, well, operational data that you can get to. How many defects, how long this machine runs, what's the cost of materials. Typically you have a lot of that type of data. we're also going to ask you to get qualitative data, which is not machine or equipment driven. It's talking to people. It's finding out what their inputs are. And a lot of times people will design, for instance, they'll go out, so we need to get some input from people. I think we'll do a survey. Okay, well, what are you going to do with that survey? How are you going to take that data, which may have scale 1 to 5, it may have qualitative fill in the blank type of things. How are you going to use that? And if you don't have that end in mind, in other words, you don't know how you might portray this data, you're going to cause yourself some grief. So one of the tips is try to visualize with the data how you're going to portray it. What type of chart is it going to go into? How will you do the analysis of that? You're going to plug it into Excel. You guys are going to sit down with a piece of paper and make pencil marks on, as you get responses. So thinking about the end of how this data is going to be collected. Often Excel is used a lot of times in data collection, in capturing things and use of pivot charts. And we don't go into pivot tables. We don't go into a great deal about that. We'd be glad to talk to you about that. We'll give you some hints on it. But I want you to think about what are the ways, once you have the data, how you're going to visually portray it. Because that chart or diagram is the language of quality, right? We speak in visuals in quality for the most part. That is, we give pictures of flow charts that shows, instead of a description of what the process is and a lot of words, we put a picture of it. We'll do a Pareto chart that you can look at very quickly and say which ones are the tall poles, which ones are the ones that contributing mostly to our problem. And so you're going to, as we're kind of kidding, you need to be able to have a visual language to be fluent in quality. And so that's one of the things which you think about. How are we going to express your data in charts and that? What do you need? Type of data do we need? And how are we going to look at that? So that's really going to be our discussion tonight. We're going to give you some tips, give you some templates, and some recommendations. How do you self-organize your team? And how are you going to go about collecting that data? So that's kind of the template for our discussion here. So what do you need? And one of the things, we started with your problem statement, and some of you had placeholders in there, right? X amount, we don't know. You get that number, typically problem statements do get refined in the measure phase because a lot of times people just don't know the scope of the problem, to what degree, or it's a gut feel, right? We know we have a problem there, but we don't know how big of a problem it is or to what degree it is. And so one of the things that you want to do initially in your data is be sure that you expressed some of these things in here about cost, quality, and time. And they go right back into your problem statement, and they go right back to refining the, about what you're looking at. And a lot of times it changes the perspective of your project once you collect data. So just because you have a problem statement now, doesn't mean that it's in concrete. Typically, after you get through the measure phase, you'll probably have it pretty well gelled. So I expect there may be some changes to your problem statement as we go through. It's typical, but you don't want to keep messing with it, much beyond the measure phase. And here's some examples. You can read them on the chart about scope. How large is the problem? It's 1,000 invoices, and they have a lot of errors, 27%. More than a quarter have it. Okay. You can just go through, and you can start to get some idea. Because one of the things, for instance, I was in with one of my clients, and we were going around the table and talking about metrics, and the guy says, hey, I know what the problem is. It's just, I don't need any of these stinking metrics. He basically said, I've been around for, 25 years. I know what the problem is. And everybody's just kind of looking at him. So what do you think of the problem is? Well, I said, I know exactly. Well, sometimes you have people like that have the gut feel, right? That I just know what the problem is. It is one of the great things I've seen in almost my journeys in using this is that once you start to collect data, usually the understanding of the problem changes. And those that particularly are very adamant that they have a handle on it, when they start to see things that they may not have appreciated before, because your chart maybe gives them new insight. Maybe they come to a new understanding they hadn't had before. So often the guys and the gals that are on the line, you know, have this gut feel. They know intrinsically what the problem is trust the data. Allow it to tell the story. This is what you've got to do, not provide opinions, because, you know, and one of the things that we'll talk about then is ensuring that your problem statement is quantitative. Where do you start? So let me ask you, okay, how do you start? Where are all this data? You know, all the things you possibly could collect out there. And there's a gazillion. In any organization, there's like hundreds. In fact, that's the problem. Way too much data. Most organizations are swimming in data. But how do you choose then what's important for your project? Rhetorical question. Here's some things to think about. It's basically a process model. Okay. Let's take a look at the inputs. You know, what are we getting? Are we getting information or requirements in a timely manner? If we're involved with building something, is the materials being furnished to us by our supplier, or maybe it's another department? Are they arriving on time? Are there defects with these raw materials or these products that we've got to work with that they're giving us, these things that we need to improve? Is their requirements clear? So you look at inputs, right? And say, okay, let's look at that. What are the things coming in that we need? And it gets back to, you know, what are our inputs to this process? What are the things we need to improve? You look at improv, and then you look at the process itself. You know, how fast is this process? Is it, you know, have defects? Does it cost a lot of money to make things of this actual process? How about the people? You know, are they capable that are working on this? Are the people well trained? Do they have the right skills? Do they have the right tools? Do they have the right attitude? You know, sometimes you have all of the above, but they don't have the right attitude. So you're looking at those things are in the process. They're taking these raw materials, whatever the requirements are, working on it. How do you describe, you know, the defects, the workforce? What's the current performance level of the workforce? All those type of things. And then the outputs. And a lot of times that's where you start and say, are the customers satisfied, or whatever we're developing, or whatever we're supposed to do? Are we meeting their requirements? Are they happy with that? And maybe the next division that they get, or whoever assembles this, or maybe whoever flies this, or who may ever assemble this, whatever you're working on, are they satisfied with what they get, how they get it, that type of thing? And is it meeting the business needs of the organization? Yeah, they're satisfied with it, but you know, it's way too high of a cost. So you look at kind of this thing and say, okay, what's the overall satisfaction rate? And I just got into a fairly large project, and they really never really kind of captured the customer's feedback and their requirements. So that was one of the first places I start. Before we start improving the project, you got to know what the gap is. And so I spent like 2.5 months talking with customers, interviewing them, collecting their information about what their requirements were, and then comparing what they were doing in the process to these set of requirements. And then it really provided a different focus, because we really kind of started with the output, and they didn't have a clear idea what their customers thought. And so that was one of the first things we started to collect data around, was what they actually needed to satisfy the customers, and also the business needs of the organization, which was not very clear. So think about this. You know, this is thinking about the things you might collect data around. Some of you in each project will have a different personality. You will have maybe no problems with inputs because you don't really have much of that. Maybe you're doing a service process. You got some really maybe excellent ones on that, but maybe we don't have so much about how satisfied our customers are with this data. So you start to say, okay, how much of this do we have, and what do we need? So does that make sense to you? as you think about that rhetorical question, here's a mathematical equation. A lot of times you'll see this in Lean Six Sigma. A lot of, if you take a black belt exam, etc., they'll explain what I just said in a mathematical formula. And it is y equals, is a function of x. And what do we mean by that? Well, is that y is the process output. So if you think about this, are we meeting customer satisfaction or meeting business needs? That's the y, okay? And what contributes to that happiness, that outcome of that? You know, is it meeting the business requirements, or is it hitting our first time through standards? And then you start to say, what are the things that contribute to that? What are the factors that contribute to that outcome? And that's then how, if you take a look at the example, is that, hey, if I had, you know, call up a department store or wherever, and you had a question to ask, okay, your satisfaction with that phone call and the information you get may be a function of, well, how long did you wait? You know, how many people were answering the phones? How long did it actually, you know, once you got through, you know, got off the Muzak and got to actually talk to a real live person, did they know what they were talking about? You know, it's like calling Comcast. You can probably go through this, or, you know, Time Warner or wherever, you know, your TV's out. You know, how satisfied you were with that call may be a function of all these things. So what you're doing now is just breaking it down and say, what are the things that contribute to that outcome? It's going to be part of your root cause analysis, actually. You know, say, okay, well, all the things are causing problems, that why people aren't happy or not meeting the business needs. Which ones are the most important, and which ones are contributing to the greatest amount to that dissatisfaction or lack of outcome. So that's the idea behind that. Is just we're not going to go into it, but a lot of times if you see this, what we just described is explained in this. You know, y is a function of x. In other words, you break down the things that contribute to the outcomes, and then you start collecting data around each one of those. How long do we have to wait? And you can measure that. How many people do they have? Okay, well, we have 3 people. You know, how long is the average time for that to get on? And you measure that, and you collect the data around that, if that makes sense. Okay. Okay. Now, is anybody figure out what the picture down there is? It's the time to put yourself off mute. Anybody want to try to explain that? So for those that may be looking at this chart, or maybe having you know, wondering who that is. Anybody know?
X-Files.
There you go, X-Files, right? Right. Excellent. Yeah. There's a younger picture of them. But basically, is that, yeah, you're kind of like in this big mystery here. You're detectives going out trying to solve the X's, right? And a lot of times that's your job. You need to have an open mind, and you need to be able, you know, have some theories about what may be going on out there. So X's, yeah. So that's the little inside joke, I guess, in behind that. And here's the other reason that you collect data. It's not only just to solve a problem. It is you got to help people understand what the problem is. And a lot of times you will go into what data that currently exists. In other words, it's in worksheets, Excel, reports, whatever. Or you have to sit there, and sometimes, and this probably won't be the case with you guys because you're online, is that you have to do observation. Well, we had an NGS team that at a hospital, they wanted to improve the throughput of the doctors. And so they had to look at, you know, what was the operation, and they had no idea about length of time people were waiting in the waiting room, which ones got seen first or anything like that, because, you know, they were all, you know, none of the people had ever done a study like that. So what the NGS team did, they just went and kind of watched the observation in the waiting room and they talked to people, you know, when they came in. This was, you know, did you call advance? Did you have an appointment? How long you've been waiting? They observed that. They observed how the nurses interface with them. and they collected data around that. They just got some spreadsheets. So observation is one way to do that. And if you don't have data, but you need it, in other words, if you start thinking about this and say, there's stuff we need that we don't currently have, is that often that is what the NGS team will do at the very beginning. And this is, if you don't have the data, in other words, it's not being captured, but you think you need it, one of the things you may have to do is actually develop a data collection plan, you know, and say, okay, hey, when you work on this, we want you to keep track of how many widgets come through here. Okay, maybe a check sheet, or maybe, you know, you have to go back through and look at emails with requests that came in, and then you have to collect them, and then you have to analyze them. So you'd have to develop actually a data collection plan. And often, that is one of the very first gifts back to the organization, is that helping them to collect data and understand that problem better. In fact, we had a couple of NGS teams that the champions were just really ecstatic to find out that they, you know, needed to collect data in a way that they hadn't had before. For instance, we're working on a project where I'm at now. Estimating is a big problem for our projects. They do small construction work. And they do alterations to the buildings and things like that. And they take a very long time in doing estimates, and they just haven't tracked that data because the work order system doesn't track it in a way that's sufficient for them to figure out how long does it take to do the estimates and what are the issues with it. So we have to develop a data collection plan. So if that's the case, when we talk about chain of mentoring, we want to put that in place as soon as possible. Because if you remember the timeline I talked about, sometimes you have to design it in this course, let it run for 3 or 4 months, maybe cycles, and then you collect data off it. So you may not have things already in place to go harvest your data, but you've got to go figure out ways to collect it. Okay, so that's one thing you sometimes do. And often that's a really important first kind of low-hanging fruit for an organization, is to let them do that. So quantitative data. And the other thing we want you to collect is the qualitative data. Is that sometimes you can go and get things down to, you know, Lean Six Sigma level, where it's almost defect-free. But the next one in line, the customer, whether it's the next division or next office or whoever uses that product, is really dissatisfied with it, even though it may be completely defect-free. Maybe they want it to be explained how this thing was being used, or perhaps they want it delivered to a different location, maybe in a more timely way. And a lot of that won't come out in just your work order reports. You have to talk to people and get their feedback about that. And the other thing that's why this is so important is the human element, is that you're not just collecting data at this phase. You're engaging with the people. And if they give you their opinions, if they give you inputs, like when I went out and talked to these customers, I got their ownership in on when we start to do the solutions, okay? And it was designed that way so that we do get that ownership. And that's what you want for buy-in. If you just look at collect data from reports, from Excel and whatever, you're not going to get buy-in. You need to talk to people and get their opinions and get their recommendations. And how you do that often is the long pole in the tent in data collection, because you may have to design some type of way for a questionnaire, or maybe sit down and talk with people and do some interviews, and those things take a little bit more time. So we would like for you to get the voice of the customer. I'm going to talk to you about that. Voice of the workforce, so the people that are involved with this thing, the people that touch this process. Are you going to be able to collect some data from them to get their ideas and different perspectives? Not just to get their data, but also to get their buy-in. And that's one of the things that's so important for your success, is that you're developing buy-in and ownership of the problem, because at the end of the day, you're going to hand this problem back to the organization. It's not your problem, it's their problem. And then you say, okay, when you brief the champion, and you go in there and also say, hey, this is the voice of the people that we talk to in your department or your office or your workforce or your team. It's just not us briefing this. we are the brokers of these people and their opinions about what this process is. And so you've gone from a team of 3 or 2 or 4 to one that is 5 that we are briefing to you back what your workforce said are the key issues. They may challenge you, but when they start to see that this is broader set of data than your own personal opinions, but you've got it based on other people's input, often that is a way to really sell your product, really sell your recommendations. And often it provides a very good set of techniques to deal with the human element part of this. So Measure is a lot about people management, quite frankly. It's not just capturing the as-is state. It's about getting success later on and buy-in to recommendations, because you want them to be involved in problem discussion, identification, and collection is one of the things that you want to do. We will cover a little bit more in the benchmarking class, surveys and focus groups and some techniques with that. My recommendation to you is, if you're going to do any type of surveys, is go take a look at, if you haven't done these before, like SurveyMonkey, which is SurveyMonkey is a website you can go to with your NGS email edu. You can get a discount, or it's free, and it's got a lot of templates. It's got a lot of developed and proven things for surveys and questionnaires. And its online capability has a lot of really nice features to it. That'll be discussed a little bit more in your benchmarking course coming up. But I want to talk to you about how are you going to get to the qualitative data as well as the quantitative data. Okay. And then, okay. Here's the thing that I'll, again, forgive me for just kind of shotgunning you with this, but I want to kind of cover the content here and then get your opinions about this. Perspectives is so important. And probably the most vulnerable one on each one of your teams is those of you who are embedded in the organization that this project is. Why do I say that? Well, because you've been working with the project. You have basically filters, you know the people, you know the culture. And the most probably challenging thing to do as a change agent, as what you guys are, is to have an open mind, to be willing to see the invisible that may be right under your nose that you have not looked at before, or maybe not seen it in a way that is others seen by your fellow students. So I really encourage those members of the team that are external to the MVP project to really challenge it and add your perspective. And this is where the richness of the experience of this course I've seen over and over time pay dividends. That members of the NGS team that are not part of that organization provide this external view and keep honest brokers. You go in there and say, what do you mean by that? I mean, like you guys in the Air Force, you can see it, you have it in language, you describe it in a way that makes great good sense, but for people on the outside, it may have a different set of views. And that's what we want you to do, is ensure that you are objective. I will be a prophet and say, you will come up and say, here what we think is the issue. You will come up a lot of times in the data collection where we're starting it and says, we already know what the problem is, and here's what the recommendations are. That is actually going to be contrary to what we want you to do. We want you to have the data and your logical analysis of that drive your recommendations. And if you already have a perspective that says, I think we know what the end is, that may be a bias for your data collection, that you have a tendency to go kind of justify what you already know or get a solution in search of a problem. This is the solution I already know, so I'm going to go collect the data to justify our solution. That is the worst thing you can do, and you're going to be called out for it. So you need to be very objective in here. And I'm going to challenge your objectivity because I am completely outside of your projects. And so I'm going to look at it and say, why are you collecting that? What makes good sense to you? And that's going to help strengthen you, quite frankly. That's what you want to do every time you do a lean project, is you want to have an external view. The other thing is, take a look at this diagram at the bottom. I want you to think about it for a moment. And it's just a way to think about tourism, right? And the different perspectives that you could have in thinking about tourism. Now, all of us have been tourists, right? All gone someplace, right? Gone on a vacation. Some of you, like to work maybe, 365 days, but folks, you've been a tourist. And if you live in a place like Washington, D.C., you've probably been impacted by tourists, right? Like during the summer, we got these crazy people driving I-95, making left-hand turns, completely lost on the Beltway, driving around in circles. There was an older couple that was just driving around 495, circles, didn't know how to get off. And they finally just stopped crying, called for help. And but you have that here. So tourism means a little bit different for those that are in the community. You could look at it from that perspective. From being a tourist, for instance, you come in and say, okay, are there things to do for the family? Are there a lot of activities that we can do over the course of the week? Is it, an environment that's safe? You look at that. So first, we'll look at this from that perspective. And you can look at that project from that, if you improve tourism, you look at that from the tourist perspective. What will attract them to our here? What will bring tourists in? What are the things that maybe drive them? If you went and talked to the business people, like the restaurant owners and the other things like this, they will have a different perspective of tourism. They will be looking at how much money we can make off of, right? The business people actually in the state of Maryland, for those maybe up here, convinced the governor of the Maryland that school shouldn't start till after Labor Day. Why? Well, people go to the beach. And if they start school, they're not coming in, just prior to Labor Day because they'll be in school. So they actually moved the openings of the school, kept the openings of the school to after Labor Day because the business people said, this is how we make money. This is how we provide more taxes back to the state. So that was that perspective in that. So they have that perspective, which is different from the tourists, who are not trying to be separated from the money. And then the government may have a perspective. Oh, well, we have a lot of tourism. We have a lot of people coming in. We need a safe environment. We have to provide security. Like you have major events here in D.C. A lot of tourists came for, various events in Washington, D.C. But, that also means deployment of police. It means crowd control. It means traffic control. It means from the government perspective, they look at it from that perspective. So the point being, and just like the elephant up here, is that each one of you will have a different perspective. Each member of the organization will have a perspective. The more perspectives you can collect, the more information from these diverse groups that you can get, the better you will be able to describe what the problem is. And so part of your objectivity is ensure that you're getting a large slice of users and potentially customers or suppliers or those members that are involved with this project. You want to go collect data if you can. Some of this will be restricted. Some organizations say, hey, you're not going out and talk to any of our customers. All right, that's just not going to occur. Others say, hey, we want you to do that. Or you're going out and survey members of the workforce. If you're doing it in the government, you actually have to go get permission in some of these agencies where you can hand out a survey because they're restricted by that. And maybe some other your own organizations have those restrictions. So, but the different perspective that you can look, and when you do your processes, and for instance, when you collect and do your process map, you can do it from the perspective of the people in the organization, or you can do it from the perspective of the customer, which is completely different. It's like cashing a check in the bank. If you did a process map from the perspective of the teller, they see you come in and they see your, whether you got the paper filled out and all that. And if you're a customer of that bank, and you did it from the customer's perspective, you probably would start with the parking lot. Oh, there's no place to park. There's a long line, even before you get in. So what perspective you use to even collect your data is really important. So, okay, that's the important part of that. So once you collect the data, you're going to just put it into buckets. That's just one of the things we talk about is called stratification. So once you start to collect data, you're going to put it into different buckets. And is this a complaint? Is this a defect? Okay, we're going to categorize that as a defect. We're going to put a, you know, how much are we going to collect? We're going to collect it monthly, you know, weekly. We're going to fill up this bucket, you know, once a month with data, or once a week. Are we going to collect it by department, by part, by, you know, where are we going to? So all you're doing is now helping you figure out all the data you're going to collect. How might you break it down by different categories, and think about that. So this will be clearer when we start to actually kind of collect data, but I want you to think about that, is that you want to look for trends and patterns, and I want you to think about how you're going to collect the data. We're going to do it by department. We're going to do it, you know, like when I did the customer interviews. I started out with very senior people, the people that are like, well, in charge of agencies, and then people that were their points of contact and their front offices and those type of things. And then we say, okay, we're going to do those first, and then we're going to go down to like the project manager level, and then we're going to go down to the first line supervisor level. We're going to talk to some of the users and say, okay, we're going to segment our data by that. Okay, so that's just putting them into a bucket. Okay, this is what the senior folks said. This is the middle manager. This is what, you know, technical folks said. So those are the ways we thought about looking at that data. So those are the same questions we're going to ask for you. Okay. Are you going to do a lot of it? We're going to go back and look at everything that got made the last 10 years, or we're going to look at last 2 years. Are we going to do a sampling size? Instead of going out and talking to everyone, are we going to talk to a representative sample? Are we going to look at all the, you know, defects we have for all the aircrafts, or are we going to look at, you know, a representative sampling? So sampling, and what time frame you're going to use is going to be important questions. And do you have sufficient information? And this is what a lot of the NGS teams kind of mess up with, is that they'll go out and maybe talk to like 3 or 4 people, and maybe this department has, you know, a couple hundred in it, and then they'll make a assumption that the view of those small number of people, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever they talk to, is representative of the entire population, which may or may not be true. And so sometimes you get into trouble by, you know, not having an accurate sample, and more savvy folks, particularly if they don't like what you're telling them, may challenge you on whether you've got sufficient information or not. So we'll talk about that and the trends you want to do. How far back are you going to take this? Okay. Here's a big thing that I want to cover with you, is operational definitions. And this is going to be 2 things. You're going to have to develop a data collection plan. Talk about what data you're going to collect, where you're going to collect it from, you know, how you might break it down. The other thing is there something that's going to be necessary to be defined so that people understand it the same way? A couple of examples of this is that if there's terms that people don't understand the same way, you want to be able to, and it's necessary for you to collect data. I'll give you an example. We had last year a team working on improving the transportation and the use of cardboard boxes, and they were being damaged, right? That's what they did. That was their primary product. They manufactured cardboard boxes tailored, you know, for packing and stuff like that. So they had defects in there. So what could be a defect on a cardboard box? Well, it could be a dent, right? It could be, you know, seam. It could be a rip in it that happened because maybe a forklift, you know, hit the box when it was loading. So what's a defect? And how do you describe that? You know, is a dent that's a ½ inch deep, is that a defect or not? Don't know. So how does your customer define that as a defect as opposed to you in the building? Oh, I went and called them up and said, oh, it has nothing to do with what we were using as, you know, how big of a scratch or anything like that. They were, gave us, you know, other set of criteria. So they had to define what defect meant in a way that, so everybody understood it. And everybody always used the term in the organization, they thought everybody understood the same way, but when they actually started boiling it down, they found out that it didn't. And there's a very important part of this then, For instance, hey, Edgar and Cameron, you mentioned first pass through, right? First pass yield, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's essentially the percentage of um, pretty much a comparison or ratio between non-conforming product to conforming product, and that's where you get a percentage. So if, let's say out of 100 units, 10 of them are non-conforming, you have a 90% first pass yield, because 90% of them had no issues.
Okay. And what would be an issue?
Customer rejection for one, and then quality, we have our own kind of rejection. So it's either paperwork errors, damage to the unit, and we have different things that we look for in terms of damage. We have some documentations or some documents that give us parameters for if there is a scratch on this, this is how big it can be, or if there's a dent on this, it should look like this. There's some acceptable way, and then there are some that are not acceptable. There's some of them that require measurements and such.
And do you think everyone in the organization understands this definition the same way?
No, sir.
Okay. That's a prime example. We're talking about an organization, operational definition. And that's one of the things that actually, that again, that we find that NGS teams give a very early low-hanging fruit gift back to the organization, is that they don't realize they may not be understanding the problem in the same way. That's one of the most powerful aspects of data collection, is that you have to try to get people to understand the problem the same way, because if they don't understand the problem the same way, they're not going to agree to the solutions that you're going to recommend. And a lot of times it is this operational definition here, which is saying what truly is the problem and writing it down, and so that you can measure it. And if you find that people don't understand it the same way, then you really got something that it would be very valuable often that you will develop at this point. And we find a lot of times champions just go, wow, we never kind of thought about it that way. And so let's talk a little bit further about that. So thanks, guys. That's a good example. And what you can do, a lot of times, particularly operational definition throws people, because they think about operations. If in the military, there's a thing called operations, right? You know, there's an operations branch, or sometimes in organizations or operations that are involved with that. That's not what we're talking about. That we're talking about a definition around a measurement, okay? Around the measurements. How, when we talk about in this context, we're talking about how do you define something that's going to be measured. And so you want to develop that. And one of the things that I find is a very good technique is try this out on yourselves, right? Okay. What's a defect? And you go around each one of the team members that you and the MVP team says, define it in your own words. And if you find out you have different definitions, there's probably a pretty good chance you need an operational definition. You know, it may be what a defect is. It may be, something that has to do with way things are counted, whatever that might be. So a good way to test this out is amongst yourselves first. If you don't understand it, there's going to be a fairly low chance that you're going to be able to then develop recommendations, if you don't understand it. And then you check within the organization as well. Is there different ways that they define it? And so there's going to be a large variety of those. And here's some examples. We've had some other teams that I want to share with you just to kind of get your thought pattern working about what operational definitions are. We actually had a Coast Guard crew and said, well, we're here to improve boat crew readiness. And they involve reservists. Reservists are the ones that don't, necessarily full-time, but work on the weekends or get called up in times of need and deployment. And but the NGS team said, well, we need to improve boat crew readiness. And so what is that? What does that mean? You know, everybody thought they knew what that meant. But when they talked to the senior enlisted guy, it gave a different definition than the commander. And then you talk to the guys, you know, that actually reservists. Each one of them had a different perspective about what that meant. And until they wrote it down and agreed to what it meant, okay, which is what they ended up doing here, that it's not only just going through the PT test and the physical fitness and having standards, it's dental. You know, you're not ready to be deployed if you have tooth problems. Who ever thought of that? Well, the guy that, you know, was telling them the readiness rate was, you know, because people had dental problems and that hadn't gone through the medical. They never thought about it in that way. Assigned weapons training, that they were able to, you know, be competent and able to use the weapons they were supposed to use and were qualified on them. So that became a part of the definition. So you can kind of look at this. There was another one that is completely different. We had another NGS team that part of the issue was that it's probably not true of any of your organizations, but their folks were not showing up to work. Or if they did show up, they would take 2-hour lunches. You know, it was one of those kind of laissez-faire type organizations. And so one of the things was to help improve that rate of absenteeism. What's absenteeism? What do we mean by that? Does that mean if I'm 15 minutes late for lunch, coming back? Or does that mean when I'm on sick call? You know, what does that mean? So they had to write out the definition. They could not actually start to define what it was they were working on until they got this operational definition in. This is another example of that. So, okay, they had to figure out what are we actually doing, okay? We had a senior vice president, actually, very upset that the projects weren't being closed out. Well, what's your definition of closure? Okay, well, that means everything they were supposed to was delivered. But not only that occurred, which is what generally everybody accepted was, but they also said you need to have collected lessons learned, and you should have had templates that you hand over to what you learned from that project to the next team. Not only is that supposed to be done, I want to be sure everybody that was on that project has a job, that they are not hanging out there on the beach someplace, but they've got another work that they're doing. This was an organization that did consulting, right? And so people would finish up the project. It was a project manager's responsibility to ensure that that person then got, you know, as part of his team, got reassigned. And final report had to be signed off by the VP. And on top of that, all the financial stuff. And by the way, this is, you know, what you may have learned in project management, but that was that definition of closure that for the most part, some people were meeting, you know, 2 or 3 of these many items. But that was that definition. So they had to get a definition before they could start to improve that process of closure. Okay, so examples. All right. So let's talk about how you're going to organize yourself and part of your requirements. First thing you do, you go back what you already have. You start working with these tools that you have. Problem statement. Look at your problem statement. Look at your process map. Start thinking about where on that flow chart could be problem areas. Where are the defects? Where's what steps in here has the largest opportunity for improvement? Where's maybe the delays? Where maybe the problem is in regards to inputs? Okay, so you start using the tools you already have. What are your customers' requirements? And are they satisfied or dissatisfied? What's most important to them? What do you need to collect data in relationship to that? So you start using the tools that you have. All right. Then as a team, this is your homework assignment. You're going to have to start to say, what's the type of data we're going to collect? Where does this exist? Is it, you know, in Access? Is it in Excel? Is it in a work order system? Is it in people's heads? You know, is it somebody's desk drawer? That type of thing. Who owns it? And what do you need to do to go get it? You know, you mentioned this is where your champions often come in. If they're not around, you need access to data, what are you going to do? Or you belongs to a contractor. That's an excellent example of you laying this thing on a plan. So, okay, what's our strategy? Is this data necessary? Is it something that we need? And how can we get that? Do we have to go through a contracting officer? Is this a forbidden thing that we're going to have to work around? So this plan, you just start thinking through all these things and saying, what are the things we need to have operational definitions on? And then when we're going to do it, and then who's going to develop the charts and darts once we get the data on our team. So, all right, there's a video that would be helpful for you to take a look at. It's around data collection. You can visit that, take a look at that thing. And then here's a template that we would like for you to take a shot at as a team to put together. You can modify this template, but basically this is your data collection form, okay? And you may be thinking about this, and I want to have a discussion when we do our mentoring sessions, but this is what we'd like for you to try to pull together for next week. What's the data you are trying to collect, okay? How are you going to stratify that? What's the bucket you want to put it into? What's the grouping, you know? We're going to look at the invoices, for instance, and we're going to look at it by month, okay, because we get monthly reports on those. We're going to do some interviews, but we're going to look at managers and contracting representatives, CORs. We're going to look at late time submission reports, and we're going to do it by shifts, maybe by all the way down to the employee level. Does anything in there, around there, we need an operational definition? Yes or no? Okay, do we need to find something that's really important? How far back, how much can we get to, and how much do we need? We're going to do 2 departments, we're going to go back 2 years, we're going to go back 1 year, whatever that might be. Where does it belong to, and who owns it, you know? Are any of these folks that own this thing need to be told by the champion that hand it over? Will there be difficulties in getting this data? If it is one that is proprietary, okay, and that's kind of the reasons, for instance, you know, we've got teams that are not looking outside. So are there any of those issues that we need to cross the bridge with early on? When are you going to collect it? In other words, when do you as a team expect to have that so you can share it with your other team members? How are you going to be able to share that is going to be your question. Is it going to be in Excel? Can we start sharing that amongst ourselves with, can we get this report run by this date, that type of thing? And who's going to be on the team responsible? And this is where because you have a lot of different, you've got 2 to 5 people on your team, is instead of all you waiting for the same thing, you may want to assign lanes. Okay, I'm going to do the interview part. I'm going to do the analysis on this particular part. So who on the team is going to be responsible? This is a guideline. If you want to modify this, that's up to you. These are things that we kind of found are a bit helpful for other teams. So we'll use this as a start point. If you want to add additional information, that type of thing. What's going to happen when you do your briefing? This is going to be your title sheet, right? This is going to be your slide that says, here's our plan. And what you're going to do in behind the slide is then you show the data, right? Oh, okay, we did interviews. Here's our interview data. Here's what the responses were. Here's what the manager said. Bum, 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 bum. Here's what we got from the analysis of the reports, work orders, okay? And so this then becomes kind of like a table of contents, if you will, or a preview of what the data that you did collect will follow this. And so, okay, we're going to brief you on here's our plan, here's what we collected, here's what then we have. Then you show the data after that. And that's what is the approach for this. So it's a very important part, and I want you to kind of think it through. What questions do you have on this? Is this self-explanatory, or anybody have any questions about this particular chart? Don't talk all at one time now. Okay, just to help me out here, be sure you're still on the other end. When is this due?
Was it 48 hours before next class?
Yeah, I'm going to change that. It's due by next class. Okay, so by Wednesday, I'd like for you to get together and brainstorm as a team. I'm going to change the suspenses here and give you a full week, as long as you have it in, because we're going to talk about this, particularly in our mentoring session, so we'll have an opportunity. And since there's not a lot of you, I'm not going to be in data overload. So if you get this in by next Wednesday, this is the thing. Now, I want you to think about when you say something needs an operational definition, then tell me what that is, okay? And then take a shot at it. You're going to have an operational definition, okay? And say, okay, what are the things we got to define that are important? Maybe defects, first time through. If you have no operational definition, then you need to be able to, each one of you, explain. If you said, yeah, I got a defect, that you be able to understand it in the same way. Okay, because I want to be sure everybody in the team understands the key elements that you're going to measure in your project. It's going to go back to your problem statement. I'm going to ask questions about that. Be sure that you're clear about that. And generally, there are operational definitions. That may not be for everything, but some teams usually do. I want to be sure you understand the concept. So do this, and then also take a stab at putting some of the operational definitions, okay? So you have your slide. Make this as long, and maybe 1 or 2 slides, however much data you think you need to collect, how you want to think about that. And then upload it into this, and then you got operational definitions if you got that. But think about how far back are you going to go, where does it reside, how are you going to share it, when are you going to get it. And so as a team, you need to kind of work this thing through and don't have in primary responsible member. It will, for the most part, the folks in the organization will probably be the gathering, but some of you may be involved. For instance, you can do phone interviews. You say, hey, yeah, we can do this. We can call some members of the organization up on the phone, do a phone interview with them with maybe a desk side or something like that. Or I'm going to be taking this part, I'm going to take that part. So I'm looking for not only just the primary person being in there to get the data, is that how you may be able to use your team effectively in roles that are clear, that each one of you has a set of responsibilities in that. So, so back to your project, fill this thing out, and then if you got questions, let me know. Write out what you think is the operational definitions, okay? You should have some qualitative data. A lot of times teams will come back and say, oh, we're done, just looking at this, but you need to be able to say, who are we going to talk to? Are we going to brainstorm with some people? Are we going to ask for their input? And if you don't, the risk is, again, is not only missing these diverse perspectives and missing the opportunity to get buy-in by the people to the problem, is that you're also kind of missing the NGS, ensuring that you are comfortable with designing tools to capture that qualitative data. If you're in a manufacturing environment, you're usually very, used to capturing operational data, but this qualitative one sometimes throws you through this. And also, figure out when you're going to collect it by. Now, a lot of times, if you're going to go out and talk to somebody, it's their schedule, not your schedule. And as a team, that may be, the dynamic. For instance, again, if the Air Force is going to be committed to this, with the hurricanes come up, you got to factor that in. That hey, that might throw us off schedule. That may be a risk factor. If you go back into your project management, this is one of the things you throw into your risk assessment. That hurricane may impact our ability to get things done. Will it be your countermeasure? Can we get this data before, is it going to be accessible? Are there going to be key people gone? Are there going to be somebody on leave that we've got this data? So you talk about that in sufficient detail so you really understand what are the risks to getting your data and doing it by the time frame that I kind of suggested to you, that by November, we want to kind of bring your data collection for the most part to a close, for you're collecting the as-is state. So kind of use that as a time frame. And then once you get that data, I'll take a look at it. We'll talk a little bit about it next time. And then what we'll do is start scheduling after next session your team, so we can sit down and kind of have a review of all your projects, going through those deliverables, and then talking particularly about your data collection, how you're going to do it, and resolve the issues that you may have. So that's kind of the all we got for you tonight. And then next week, by the way, we're going to talk about a charter. I'm going to talk about the Pareto root cause analysis, and high level, the milestones that you need to have for that. So we'll cover those topics. You will need to develop a Pareto or a notional Pareto by the end of this course, and a fishbone diagram. So the data that you have, you start to collect. Interview data often is very good to go into fishbone diagrams, by the way, because it gives you a lot of different information or brainstorming. The Pareto often is very good for a collection of data that says, okay, what are we doing? So you're going to be developing at least two of those things. So when I talk about the end, think about the data and how you might be able to do a Pareto and a root cause analysis fishbone. Ishikawa chart is what it's called as well. And we'll talk more about that next week. So if you're not sure about what these are, do a little research on them. We'll talk about them in much more detail. We've got some templates for you in the course materials for you to use. And there's also a draft charter. The other thing, as I mentioned, before we get together, there's just a self-evaluation of a team member chart. And let's see if I got it here. I can show you. Maybe not, but there is a chart, a PowerPoint feedback to do this evaluation of your fellow team members. So take a look at that, because I want to talk about team dynamics, kind of get a feel for how well you're functioning as a team. Be honest, open, candid. That's still part of this. So I want to be sure you guys are not stuck in storming phase as well. That's the other kind of outcome I have with you. And when I touch base with you, I want to be sure you're functioning well and that you're on a successful track. So I know I covered a lot. Got a lot of airtime with me. You're probably very sick of hearing my voice at this point. It's a long day on a Wednesday, but let me stop here, and then let me see what questions you have about anything that we covered, as well as the assignments. So let me turn it back to you guys. Okay, let me just kind of go through. Cameron, you got any questions or comments?
No, sir, I'm good.
Okay, good. Nicolo, are you?
I'm good, sir.
Okay. Well, a lot of material, right?
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Edgar, how about yourself?
None at the moment, sir.
Okay. More to come, right? Probably will be when you get into it. All right. Hey, Dave.
I'm good.
All right. Dave?
I was sticking as far as the data, we have a lot. There's a lot of data. We just need to figure out how to dissect it and what we want to keep and what we want to use and how we want to display it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that comment is one that sometimes, you know, is worse than they actually have not enough data. And some teams I find, particularly, yes, part of my role is to let's get some idea of doability. Some teams, they go out and, man, that, you know, they're getting data from the entire, you know, operations from East and West Coast, or they're doing the entire, you know, Coast Guard or Air Force, you know, and you're not going to be able to get to it. So I can give you, you know, from my experience with other teams, the doability about that and what's going to be sufficient in that. But that sometimes it's got too much. And so what's going to be the priority of the data? It will be part of our discussion. And I can, you know, give you my 25-cent view from experience, as well as what you think is going to be really necessary. So that's a good place to be, having more data than you can digest. But sometimes it's the, you know, one that you don't have. You focus just collecting and gathering that, and then you don't really realize, oh, there's really something, you know, and what typically happens in my experience, once you get into this, you'll start thinking, man, maybe we need to go get some of this. Maybe we need some of that. And that is very typically what comes out of teams is you'll start to gather the data and say, man, we really ought to go be looking at this, or we need to be going like that. And when you do your benchmarking and you start looking outside, a lot of times they'll say, man, there's somebody who's got some really great ideas. I want to spend some time, go get that in, bring that in. And so when are you going to get that done? And what's the time frame? Yeah, is part of our discussion. And so those are great questions when you bring them up. Is that how are you going to get to it? To what degree? And because my intent is that after you finish this course, that you have a pretty good, comfortable feel that you have sufficient data that's going to meet the requirements of getting you really great recommendations, as well as meeting the academic requirements of doing all the charts and darts and things, the requirement that you show how to use these tools. Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks, Jay. Anything else? Judith?
Nothing, sir. Lots to think about, to read on and get. As Jay was saying, we do have a lot of data, but as you were alluding to earlier, the different background and within the group. First off, we needed to understand the data, understanding its value to the MVP, and then how to proceed with the data. So it will be great to get your input on that, sir.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jay. Megan?
No, I don't have anything right now. I'll just, I agree with Jay and Judith. We just have a lot of data, and we just got to figure out a way how we're going to digest this and figure out what's really important and what's going to be beneficial for us to use.
All right. And Ron?
I'm good to go, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'm waiting for a response from Matthew. I just asked him that. All right. Any other questions or comments as we go through here? Was tonight helpful for you? Is there anything that you thought particularly was insightful or gave you some new understandings of approaches?
I'd say the difference between the qualitative and the quantitative. I myself like having a lot of data to see and categorize, but when you talked about those two, it did help separate some of the things that I'm looking to talk with Cameron about considering for our data.
Okay. All right, thanks, Andrew. Any other comments from anyone? Okay. Thanks. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact, reach out for me. I'll hang on for a bit for those that may have, questions you think are not for the entire group. But it's good to be back with you. And I look forward to our session. If you have recommendations once we get our mentoring, I'll look for a schedule, or at least a scheduling of 2 sessions with you. I'm right now during the day pretty well tied up. I may be able to pull some time during the day for some of you that may if you want to do a lunch hour, or if you want to do something like that, but it may be a little bit challenging for not this week after. So let me know what your proposed dates and times. If not, we'll stack you up on a Wednesday. We can always put in 3 teams in this. The mentoring sessions will probably be about an hour or 55 minutes. Give me at least 5 minutes to, bring one team down and bring another team up. On the GoToMeeting, it takes a little bit to, shut one down, bring another team up. But Wednesdays will always work. If you want to do it on a different day, start thinking about that, and take a look at the evaluation, and if we'll go from there. So thanks again. I wish you all a good evening, and for those that may be in harm's way, look forward to seeing you next week, and hopefully with no issues. But if there are, just shoot me a text or an email. Thanks. Mike.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.